Well, we are here standing in solidarity with all the advocates across the country who are calling on the abolition of the death penalty.
My son was wrongfully accused and falsely convicted of murder for hire.
My little brother was executed in 2010 by firing squad, and it's kind of ruined my life. So I got post-traumatic stress. So I'm here to fight against the death penalty, and I don't believe in it in no way, shape, or form.
My son was convicted and then the next day was sentenced to die. He had just turned 20. He's been in there 20 years now, a little over, and we're still fighting to get him home.
When my younger brother Paul, he was approached by a man named Dennis Sutar, who stabbed him repeatedly, and my brother died shortly thereafter. We see Dennis literally falling through the cracks. There was no support system in place. Why? Because 6 months beforehand, the state of Connecticut cut all funding to help people like Dennis, the mentally ill, homeless, and poor.
Dr. King felt so passionately about the death penalty. He said, it's society's final assertion that we will not forgive.
And the death penalty is, simply put, a legalized modern-day version of lynching.
This country has been birthed out of imperialism, genocide, racism, and our posture as a country should be about humility and repentance.
We're in a moment where we can see the end of the death penalty, and we can also see the spike that is coming.
We're here today with our message, standing in solidarity as a people.
This is what democracy looks like! Do not be complicit in the death penalty sponsored by the United States of America.
The death penalty only creates more victims, more grieving families.
We're here to abolish the death penalty and demolish the death house.
And welcome, everybody. This is another episode of The Forecast. Welcome. We do this every first Sunday of the month normally when it works. Sometimes the Sundays come after or very close to the first execution, so we shift it, but this time it worked out. This is a program of death penalty action. We're going to be looking at the upcoming executions in July and also a little bit beyond July. We're going to be hearing from people who know, in at least one case, the people being executed. I want to invite everybody to put if you're in the Zoom audience, feel free to introduce yourself, where you're watching from. Want to welcome everybody who's joining us. We're expecting a few more people to come as well. And I want to say that you heard me say in that video, which was made in 2022, on January 16th, 2022, when I said we're looking at a spot, being in the space where we could abolish the death penalty or where we could experience a spike in executions. And unfortunately, it's the latter. We are looking at more and more states that haven't executed people in a long time setting dates. And that includes Indiana just asked for a date. Utah is trying to get a date set. Idaho is trying to get a date set. Louisiana, we believe, any day now, they're going to announce a number of execution dates. They haven't done an execution there in well over a decade now. But they have a whole new administration that is set, a new governor who used to be the attorney general, who was doing everything he can to reverse the progress that was made by the former Louisiana governor. So there's all of that. But in particular, today we're going to talk about the two executions that are scheduled in July. And we'll also talk a little bit about what's coming up in August and September. So I'm going to just share my screen again real quick and just go back to where you can find all of the action tools. As you know, Let's see if we can do this right this time. There we go. So this is the front page at deathpenaltyaction.org. I'll put the link in the chat. And basically, yeah, right at the top, you can find our featured campaigns. You can read about the victory we had with the company that has that made the execution drugs used in the 13 federal executions. We got this company to agree that they would no longer manufacture or sell the drugs used for lethal injections. That was with our partners at Worth Rises. So that victory is very recent. But most importantly, you're going to see the upcoming executions petitions where we can see Ruben Gutierrez. We're going to start with this one just because we what we know, well, I'll talk about this in a moment, but here is we've got 12,460 signatures. We're going to try to get that up to maybe around 15,000 before we deliver the petitions. There's not a whole lot to talk about in this case, although there should be, right? Ruben Gutierrez had a stay. I think he was originally set for execution around the time of in the middle of COVID. So we've had this petition floating around waiting, but he got a date. He's always been asking for DNA evidence. What we know is that Ruben has, like I said, always maintained his innocence. We don't have a lot of information about from his attorneys, I should say. That's one of the things that Death Penalty Action always tries to do, is work closely with the legal teams when they want to work with us. And some legal teams have no interest in being connected. Others actually feed information to us quite aggressively and count on us or elements of our organization to help with some of the work around executions. In Mr. Gutierrez's case, we are in touch with his family. They and Ruben himself are happy with what we're up to. However, they're also deferring to the attorneys and what they're going to be filing for a clemency campaign. And what we'll be doing, what Death Penalty Action will be doing, is towards the end of this week, we will make sure that the petitions are delivered to the Texas Board of Pardons and Parole. And that will happen before normally, but seems like they do is they have their conversations on the Friday prior to the execution week, and then they announce their decision on the Monday of execution week. Let me rephrase that. They announce that they're denying clemency on the Monday of execution week. And at that point, we then repackage the additional petition signatures with all the ones we have so far. And we have a delivery to Governor Abbott's office in Texas. And that's what the plan is for this one. So we're asking people, please spread the word, help us ramp up the numbers of signatures. And to the extent that we can amplify this case as we move forward, we're going to be doing that as we always do. I'm looking in the chat to see if there's any comments or questions that I can address about the Gutierrez case. Thanks everybody for introducing yourselves. Thank you, Rebecca, for your comment on the video. We're going to be releasing a new video tomorrow. Just wait till you see that. And let's see. Just checking look here for questions or comments. Well, thanks, Melvin. Melvin's on from Delaware, where just last week we passed HB 70, which scrubbed the language allowing the death penalty in the Delaware statute from the Delaware statute, which is great because Delaware now becomes a state without the death penalty at all in its statute. The Supreme Court there had thrown out the legislation, thrown out the death penalty, the practice of it in Delaware in 2016. This was a cleanup bill, but still symbolic. And the beautiful thing for me, I did a lot of work in Delaware in 2013, 15, 14, 15. Just when they had that roll call vote, they had a number of people voting yes on that bill who were big problems for us and against us 10 years ago. So things can shift. Anyway, that's what's happening with with uh, with Delaware. So thanks for being here, Melvin. And I see other folks. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. Jeff, Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood has joined us. Jeff, do you have any further information on what we know about the petition, in the petition regarding Ruben Gutierrez?
I don't have any further information.
Okay, well, Jeff is not in touch with every prisoner who has been a part of it, and often, Cantor Mike Zusman also is also somebody that I would ask that question of, because he writes an email, he sends a letter to every single person who gets an execution date, and I just don't know if he's been in touch with him. But Cantor Zusman is in the middle of moving. He's moving out of the country to Canada this week, so we are not hearing too much from him. But anyway, that's the case with the situation in Texas, and of course there will be a virtual vigil at the time of that execution, and we'll have some folks on the ground outside the prison there, as we always do, to report on what's happening, and for all of us to be together in prayerful protest opposed to that execution. So with that, we'll move on to the next execution. So let's get back to our screen here, and we're going to go back up to again, deathpenaltyaction.org. Just scroll down a little bit to the upcoming execution petitions, and that's where you find Keith Gavin. And with us today, so just to point out some of the issues with Keith Gavin, and then I know that Jeff has been in touch, and also Reverend Hopkins is here, and she's been in touch with Keith for quite a while, so we're going to hear about him. So the main thing here is that we know that there was constitutionally inadequate legal representation during sentencing, and that was ruled on by a federal judge, but reversed by the Court of Appeals in 2022. And we're not meeting either constitutional or legal standards, and of course, nobody in authority cares one bit. So there's a number of other issues. You can read about them on here, but what's most important here is we get to know a little bit about Keith Gavin through people who know him. So first I want to bring Reverend Hopkins, who has visited him and written with him for for a number of years. She'll tell us how much, but Lynn, thanks for being with us tonight from Montgomery. You are a Unitarian Universalist minister at the Unitarian Church there in Montgomery. And tell us about your experience and your relationship with Keith.
Yeah, I've known Keith almost since I came to Alabama. It's been about 10 years. A mutual friend who wrote a book about the journey of the Troy Davis execution contacted me because Keith had read the book and reached out to her, asking for connections. So we started corresponding, and then I began visiting in Atmore as often as I was able. I haven't been to Atmore in a few years now, but we are still on the phone, not quite every day, but close to it. And, Keith he's the sort of guy who is just the perfect target for the death penalty. He grew up in public housing. He has, lived his life in a violent, gang-infested environment with relatives who'd been incarcerated. He had a previous incarceration. and talking with him, it is clear that he doesn't have a solid understanding of the process. He's an unsophisticated guy. Mostly when we talk, he likes to talk about politics. He pays attention to what's going on in the world around him. He cares about the other folks who are in there with him. But in recent years, when they relocated death row to a new building, because the facility, if it were anything but a state prison, would have been condemned. It was just so dilapidated, and they moved him to a new facility where the guys spent a lot of time in common area because they shared a TV. And he was overwhelmed by the prevalence of mental illness among his fellow inmates. And so in recent years, he has spent most of his time by himself in his cell, studying, reading, writing. He converted to Islam and tries to grasp and practice the tenets of Islam. But he has a great deal of concern for the well-being and conditions under which other people live. He's worried about what's going to happen in the election. He's worried about what's going on with his family. He's he's a guy that I've always found him easy to talk to. He doesn't share a lot of what's going on with him. He is closed off, keeps himself safe, as one might expect, frankly. But for me, a lot of folks get in this struggle because they are aware of executions of innocent people. And frankly, that's how I first started being really actively involved with Troy's case, because the injustice was so repugnant and obvious. But through the guidance and conversations with Troy, I quickly took the position that it really doesn't matter whether or not they've committed the crime. I don't think Keith has ever admitted. He has told me his cousin who was with him turned on him, and that's who actually committed the crime. And I neither believe him nor disbelieve him. I don't care whether these guys have committed the crimes for which they're convicted. I don't care whether or not Keith did this crime. He's a human being. People care about him. I care about him. And that's where we are.
Thank you, Lynn. Jeff, you've also been recently in touch with Keith, and I want to invite you to add any further observations. And Lynn, we are working to make sure that there's somebody to help us understand and represent and be present with Islamic prayers at the time of the execution on our online vigil. So if you have anybody in particular, I'm reaching out to one of the people that often does that with us. But if there's an Alabama person that would fit into that piece for us, we would welcome that. So please keep your eyes open. Jeff, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Sorry, the cat was about to pee in my office.
Can't have that.
So, yeah, I have no experience with Keith in the way that Lynn does. I mean, Lynn, it seems, from what he has said and, from what I've heard from you, I mean, y'all's relationship has been incredible, and I know incredibly helpful for him and incredibly valuable for him. There's a hold on one second. Um, there's a sense in which Keith has all of these relationships all over the country, and I feel it, and I've realized that from people contacting me to tell me to contact Keith, and they want to check on Keith or whatnot. But I think that I think that my experience of him has been very similar to Lynn's in that yeah, there I do sort of wonder how much he realizes what's going on. I mean, I think that it's pretty clear that he knows an execution's coming up, but I'm not sure that he realizes that that means he's going to die. Um, it's a very strange, it's a very liminal space for him, and that's been very clear to me from the first conversation we had. The Lynn, as to keeping up with current events and that and whatnot, the first thing he said to me when we talked, he said, "I seen you on television. I seen you on television," and he was very glad to make that connection. But I think it just speaks to the sadness of all of this, the horror of it all. That here we are once again with someone with questionable intellect, um, and there seemingly seems to be nothing that we can do. I'll also state that Keith is a Sydney Austin client, which Sydney Austin is a Chicago law firm, one of the one of the law firms that the Equal Justice Initiative has brought in. And, Alan Miller is also a Sydney Austin client. Keith is very much feels like they are being targeted because they're Sydney Austin clients. I'm not sure that that's true, as much as I think that that's a construction in his head and a way of explaining what's happening. Lynn, I think that you're also right, very right in saying that he told me for probably 45 minutes he talked to me about his innocence, and it seems to be pretty clear that that's not the case. But like I've dealt with some of these other guys, it's very clear that that's the case for him, that he believes what he is saying. And one of, Lynn, your job, my job, one of the jobs of the pastor, the spiritual advisor, is to sort of join someone in that space, whether it's true or not. And I think that speaks well of any minister. And Lynn, I want to give you some flowers tonight, but I think it speaks well of you that you were able to join him where he's at. Because everybody wants to say, did he do it or didn't he do it? What happened? What didn't happen? I think our job, and that's what we have to remember on this call tonight. Our job is to join these guys where they are. And right now, where Keith is that he 100% believes he's innocent, struggling to understand what's happening to him. And he's in a place where there's a lot of other people struggling to understand what's happening to them too.
Thank you. I want to add Esther Brown from Project Hope to Abolish the Death Penalty, just to invite any additional comments, Esther, regarding how people are feeling on death row, or what's the board thinking, and all of that. You'll need to unmute.
Okay. It's of course a very difficult time for everybody. Just he appears to be doing well, you know. His imam stops by frequently, and he is with a group of other Muslims who will stop by and pray at his cell, you know, as Lynn said, when they were moved to cells, solid doors. There's only the little slit there where they can put the food in, which means they get more outside time because they don't have television in their cell. So there is a chance what they do then once somebody's on single walk, and of course he's on single walk now, once they get the date, they're on single walk, there's time in the television room. But I have heard that he's not so particularly keen on that. But, you know, I think that the imam stopping by, I think is very important, that his little group of Muslims stopping by and praying with them, I think that's very important. I have heard that he had quite a leadership role. It doesn't apparently stay the same, you know, things change in prison. And they would get together and they would cook and stuff like that, you know. But all these executions just make it a very difficult time at home. And I speak to several, and it's difficult because we're also going through remembrance, when we remember the brothers who have been murdered by the state. You forgive me, that's what I call it. And it just is, it's getting to be overwhelming for us, quite honestly, in Alabama. And of course, no hope, to be quite honest. The US Supreme Court, well, I won't even say anything. I don't have to, we all know. But at the same time, we try and stand together the best we can.
Thank you, Esther. You know, we've got another date that's been sought, and we've already got Alan Miller coming up. It's in September. We're going to talk about that week in September in a moment. But there's another person that they're seeking also to execute using gas suffocation coming up in. You know, so we know it's hard. We know everybody's. I remember during the federal execution spree, it was like it was Friday nights when they would tap people on the shoulder and say, "Warden wants to see you," and that'd be the last time they saw all their friends, because they'd end up straight over to Death Watch, and that was where they would be to the end. But it was, you know, getting past Friday night, you know, each week as to whether you're getting a date or not.
I was going to say quickly, just to add, Derek Dearman, one of the guys that I'm working with, the prison informed him a week ago that they're pursuing a date in Alabama, and I would imagine that date is going to be coming through within the next week.
Yeah, because, you know, there are a couple of people who've given up their appeals. Kerry Grayson, I know him very well. He was with Project Hope. He's a very gifted artist. I have been in touch with him. You know, it's too much, quite honestly. And, you know, and we as a less Western leading nation or whatever we think we are, it's unbelievable that we're still back in the dark ages, but that's where we are.
I think it's important to also say, Esther, Lynn, as you well know, y'all do not stand alone. Folks in Alabama do not stand alone. I think about Alabama every day, and my guys in Alabama every day. And Esther, your leadership is amazing down there. You know, I always say that, but I also know that your leadership is amazing. These guys on death row, their leadership is amazing. I got my On Wings of Hope newsletter. If you don't get Project Hope's newsletter, get on their mailing list. It's a beautiful thing to still get something that you can touch and you can feel, and you can read. Anyways, thank y'all so much.
And we thank you. We thank you. And
Share,
thank you for checking up on me. Yeah.
What's that, Esther?
No, I was thanking Jeff because he checks up on me every now and then to see whether I'm all right.
Yes. Well, we're all grateful for you. Here's the webpage for Project Hope to Abolish Death Penalty, PHADP .org. I'll put the link in there, and basically this, you just get on here and you can click on Wings of Hope, and this is where you can sign up to receive it and read the back issues and all this. And again, this is Project Hope to Abolish the Death Penalty is basically run by the prisoners on death row. And Esther is their voice on the outside, and they produce this. And you can see when you look at it that it's clearly produced in prison by people that have access to certain resources and not other resources. So all that's good.
Abe, I think
Yeah.
it bears noting also that Keith had a non-unanimous jury sentence. So he was one of those many cases that in another place and time would not have received the death penalty. It was 10-2.
We need to add that to the talking points on the petition. That's an important issue as well that I'd heard about. Thank you for raising that for us. So we will do that. So I did want to invite Connie if she's available. Senator Connie Johnson with Oklahoma, one of our board member from Oklahoma is also on the panel if she's accidentally, but we're glad that she's here if she wanted to add any solidarity messages. But we are also in the space, again, as I talked about with Texas. And by the way, with Ruben Gutierrez, I did just get a message from Cantor Zusman, who said he has written a message repeatedly to Ruben Gutierrez and not heard back. Now, Ali Sullivan, who is normally on this, but she's had quite a week with being present to the last two executions and then on to the fast and vigil. And following the fast and vigil in DC, she went on to visit several other prisoners in other prisons. So she let me know she wasn't up for being on tonight. But what Ali has done is been in touch with Ruben's wife, and she is appreciative of what we're up to. And again, they are letting the lawyers be out front on this. So, what we've got is what's available to us on that petition, and we're going to continue to do what we always do, which is provide a footing and a space for anybody who wants to oppose any execution. That's what we have. And so with that, I want to go back and share my screen, and we'll move on to the just what else is happening next in terms of these executions. So we're going to go back to here. Okay, so this is again deathpenaltyaction.org, and you scroll down to we always put the most upcoming executions, but then you click here to get to the more execution petitions. And that's where you see what the rest of the schedule is looking like. And right now, we've got Arthur Burton in Texas, Tabaron Honey, if I'm saying that right, in Utah. That's a first execution in over a decade. If that one goes forward, we know that they're working to stop that. The maybe good news, and this is the thing that we wanted to talk about next, is this week in in September, where we have two executions simultaneously if they happen on September 24th, which I believe is a Tuesday. Just double checking that. The 24th is a Tuesday, and then the 26th, two executions, one in the morning, one in the evening. There's very little hope of stopping any of these, except for the Marcellus Williams one. And that is because he's got DNA showing evidence. He's got the Innocence Project going full on. And by the way, later this week, on the 9th, I believe, our friends at Missourians Against the Death Penalty are having a special Zoom meeting to share about the campaign they're building for Marcellus Williams. And he has a hearing, I think, on August 21st. August 21st, they're going to have an evidentiary hearing to discuss the evidence in that case. So it's a good shot that execution will be put off. But still, right now we have 3, and we are expecting more dates to be set. We should hear any time now about a date in Indiana, about a date in maybe in Idaho. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we expect a slew of execution dates to be set in Louisiana. So with that, one of those people that's being set to be executed on September 26th is Emmanuel Littlejohn. And Jeff is going to be, that's the next time that Jeff, I think, is going to be in a death chamber with somebody if that execution goes forward. The interesting thing about that case is Emmanuel Littlejohn didn't kill anybody. You got to look at that petition. And tomorrow, we're going to be, not sure exactly what time yet, but there'll be an email about this. Will be
11 a.m.
What's that?
11 a.m.
11 a.m. Central. Okay, so we're set on that now. 11 a.m. Central. There'll be an email out in the morning with a link to how you can watch it on all of our social media channels. But essentially, we're going to be talking. Jeff's going to be talking about Emmanuel Littlejohn, and maybe Emmanuel will actually be able to join us in person live and take questions and make comments. Ultimately, what we know about that case is that there was a robbery and Emmanuel's co-defendant shot somebody, and the eyewitnesses all affirm that. And yet at trial, the state asserted each of those men were tried separately. The state asserted in each of those different trials that the guy that they were trying at that time was the actual shooter. So Emmanuel was the actual shooter when they were convicting him. And then the co-defendant was the actual shooter when they were convicting him. So they can change their story. And that's what they did in order to try to get him. And of course, the eyewitnesses, if I understand this correctly, and Jeff, you can please fill in from here. But if the eyewitnesses basically said that the other person, the other robber, was the one that pulled the trigger and that shot the victim in this case. And he got life. And Littlejohn got a death sentence. Jeff, you want to add in? You've been on the phone with Littlejohn all the time. So what do you got?
Yeah, I think he did a pretty good job. I've known Emmanuel for about 2 years now, and he and I are pretty close. I got a chance to talk to him earlier today. He is good spirits. He's a funny guy. He's got jokes every time I talk to him. The first thing when I ask him how he's doing, he always says he's doing time, and that's his classic response. But we've made a short film about Littlejohn and about this case. We're going to be releasing that tomorrow too at 11 o'clock. It's just very important to say this is a situation where 2 men go in to rob a convenience store. Somebody, a second clerk, comes out from the back, startles them. One of the men had already run out the door, and one of the other men turns around and fires a shot, and it kills a guy named Kenneth Mears, who was a second clerk. And we know that Littlejohn wasn't the shooter because there was a housing project across the street, and multiple witnesses who were sitting on their porch described the light-skinned, shorter guy as not being the shooter and the taller, darker-skinned guy as being the shooter. The state, which it often does, decided to play alternative theories with this case and again argued a different theory at each trial so that they could get a murder conviction at each trial. And so, we have a situation in which I firmly believe that Little John wasn't the shooter. But then there's this secondary part, what's called felony murder in Oklahoma, but the law of parties in Texas and other states, meaning that if you're a party to a crime, you can be held responsible to the fullest extent of the law if you are found to have been complicit or have some involvement in the crime. I had a really interesting conversation with a well-known journalist in Oklahoma last week. He said that under Oklahoma law, it is possible for the getaway driver to be executed. Somebody that that has no idea that anybody's going to get shot, just has a simple tangential relationship to the crime. And so I think that this case is incredibly important because it brings up a variety of issues of basic fairness. One of the things that I've said consistently about Emmanuel is folks in Oklahoma say they want eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Emmanuel ain't got no eyes and he ain't got no tooth. Like he ain't taking any eyes and he ain't taking any teeth. So this is a case that I think illustrates a real problem in the law, and it also shows the hypocrisy of conservative evangelicals in the way that they are interacting with the death penalty, because they have no problem pushing for somebody like Emmanuel Littlejohn to be executed when this case goes against everything they say that they are for.
Well, there you have it. So we're going to be highlighting that Little John's clemency hearing is August 7th. Is that right? So that means we've got just about a month to ramp it up. We've got about 3,000 signatures on his petition so far. Sounds like Jeff is going to be a part of that presenting during that clemency hearing. We are going to make sure all of your voices are present through the submission of our petitions. And of course, as soon as it feels right, we'll be ramping up the phone calls in each of these cases. I did want to mention that in Alabama, a week from Tuesday on the 16th, we'll be doing a petition delivery at the Capitol in Alabama. So if you're in Alabama, if you know people in Montgomery, that area, you want to make sure that they join us down in front of the Capitol, 11:45 a.m.-ish on the 16th. And we'll go in, we'll have a little press event, talk to the media, and then go in and deliver those petitions as we do in advance of each execution. And then we'll be looking to make sure that, it's the middle of summer, school's out, but we still want to make sure that there are people standing in protest. Often it's just Lynn Hopkins outside the Capitol, and it's a handful of other people at different spaces, and we're trying to lift that up. And by the way, there's in Alabama, there's also going to be a big meeting led by some evangelical folks in Alabama who are trying to raise this issue up among many different communities of faith in particular. That's going to be in August. We'll get more word out about that, and looking to just build the movement. And I think that that's the key thing that we have to understand here. Death penalty action is not lawyers. We don't do legal representation. We applaud when lawyers are doing their job. And if there's something more that gets to be done, then we're happy to step in and do it. And we'll also, call it out if there's lawyers who have abandoned their clients and not doing the full job that they could be doing. Not trying to second guess anything, but just, one of the things we do is give voice to the people being executed, and that's what's happening here through a little bit less so with these cases in July. But like I said, when we're going to hear Emmanuel Littlejohn's voice tomorrow, he's actually the voice narrating the video that we're releasing tomorrow. It's pretty powerful stuff. So watch for that. I want to call for any questions before we wrap this up. Is there anything further that we want to add? Any of you that are here on the panel?
Hey, something I thought about Ruben Gutierrez and that I just remembered. In 2020, he was one of the cases, along with John Henry Ramirez, about the spiritual advisor being able to lay hands on him. So again, I mean, I know the case is about a woman who stashed cash in her home and there was a robbery. I mean, I can tell you a little bit about the case, but I also know that his spiritual advisor wanted to lay hands on him, and I think that it's important to point out because I think that speaks a lot to what I'm able to do in the execution chamber when I accompany these guys. So I think that there's real, regardless of the crime, regardless of guilt or innocence, I think some of these guys are real heroes because they've opened up a much broader space amongst spiritual advisors and people of faith on death row.
It's true.
I'm sorry. I'd just like to mention that there's someone that created a GoFundMe trying to help Keith get his body sent back to Chicago for a Muslim burial there. His family has no financial assets available. And as we know, the death penalty inflicts the greatest punishment, not on the man they murder, but on his family. And that is repeating itself here. And thank you for posting that.
I put the link in the chat. And this is what it looks like. So Lisa Robbins actually contacted me last month and asked for our help. And, I've chipped in, and I know Esther has chipped in, and we're inviting folks who can to help them. They've got less than $1,400 left to raise to try to, transport Keith's body and make sure he gets the burial that he's hoping to have. And you can read more about that at this GoFundMe. So take a look at that. And with that, I want to thank everybody for participating. I want to again let you know tomorrow morning there'll be an email with a link to watch if you want the debut and the press conference that we'll do around the Emmanuel Littlejohn case. I want to say that if you're going to be just my schedule the next 2 weeks, really, looks like we'll be we might be in Delaware Wednesday evening. We're still working that out. And Melvin, you'll hear about that if that's happening. But otherwise, Thursday evening, there is a celebration with John Zakovich, the outgoing executive director of Pax Christi USA, one of our greatest allies and supporters doing this work. And he's moving on to something else. And Jeff, what's the dog's name?
Oh, Sylvie.
Sylvie. Okay, well, got to have your abolition dog here. And there is actually, I just saw, I'll send out a link about this. There's a Dogs for Abolition Instagram page that we just noticed a couple of weeks ago. So watch for that. If you got a dog, pop it in there. Anyway, then after that celebration for John Zakovich and Pax Christi USA in Washington, D.C., we're going to be on our way down to the Wild Goose Festival, where we'll be making some presentations to this progressive evangelical community. And then from there, Esther, we're heading on over to support you in Alabama. So Charles, Keith, and I expect to be there, through the execution. And then we're going to be looking, hopefully not too soon, but Indiana, where a date is expected to be set. But there is this huge, I forget what it's called, but this huge march that's been taking place from different corners of the United States. Catholics are marching to convene and converge in in Indianapolis, of all places. And we're hoping to be a part of that celebration, and also just, finding, this is what Death Penalty Action does. We're not out. It's always good when we can change people's minds, but we don't really see that as our primary mission. Our primary mission is to find the people that agree with us and get them to do something, and to give them the tools to do something that's impactful. And that's what we're up to. So I want to say a special thank you to Bob and to somebody else that may be listening who have recently alerted us to some opportunities for grants. We're always looking to meet with different people who can help fund this work. And we invite everybody, of course, if you're able to, just go to deathpenaltyaction.org and make a donation. And with that, are there any final questions or thoughts? I see there's been a lot of chats going on here. Okay. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody. And with that, I'm going to share my screen one last time and take us out with this amazing, powerful, and very sad rendition of Strange Fruit by our Death Penalty Action troubadour, Mr. Brandon Pfeiffer.
Southern trees bear a strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the roots. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, see the bulging eyes, see the twisted mouth. Oh, the scent of magnolia, sweet and so fresh, mixed with the smell of burning flesh. Tell yourself it was a different time. You tell your children time to leave the past behind. So quiet in the courtroom, in the church you sing all about the Lord's love, quoting Dr. King. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck one more fruit, one more fruit, for the rain to gather on, for the wind to sow, for the hot sun to rot and the tree to drop. Here is a strange and bitter crop. Strange fruit hanging from the southern trees. It's harvest time in the southern breeze.
Wow, Brandon.